As promised, Dr. Gallagher is joining us on season 2, episode 1 of Truth Be Told, Hosea 4:6 podcast. Stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? This is your boy, Trevor Delaney, coming back to you for season 2, episode 1. I know we concluded on whatever note. Jamal and I have a lot going on, so this is not a full-time job for us. But we just felt the need to go ahead and just start up season 2. So we do appreciate everybody that tuned in and listened to us. In season 1, we had a lot of good feedback. We appreciate y'all. We reached the pinnacle of right around 15,000. Now we're close to 2,000 downloads, and we're not even a year old. So that's something phenomenal for us. Let's see what else. House stuff. We saw a tremendous response from the subjects dealing with anything of the occult, demonology. Tremendous response from Father Eric Younger episode, who is the Anglican exorcist who joined us. So you guys had a lot of questions about that. We received a lot of inbox comments on that subject as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest because I want to really pick his brain. Over that course of time while we were on break here at TBT Hosea, I read a book called Demonic Foes, My 25 Years as a Psychiatrist Investigating Possessions, Diabolic Attacks, and the Paranormal. And what's unique about this is, as you see behind the author's name, the initials is MD, medical doctor. So I've been advertising all week on our Instagram page and Facebook page about Dr. Gallagher, even abstracting a clip from YouTube. Most of y'all seen that. I think a lot of people may have been apprehensive about responding to that clip. I mean, it is kind of punchy in the gut. I'm gonna tell you, there was some chapters in there. I had to take a couple deep breaths on that one. But we're going to be talking about that and more with Dr. Gallagher. Dr. Gallagher, so let me say welcome to Truth Be Told, Hosea 4:6.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Most definitely. If you want, you can go ahead and tell the people. I always allow my guests to tell the people a little bit about themselves. I know some people might read the bio, but whatever you want the audience to know, you can take 90 seconds here just to disclose any information you want people to know about yourself.
I am a Christian, of course, and I am a professor of psychiatry. I do a lot of teaching. I teach at Columbia University and New York Medical College, as well as at a seminary in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a practicing psychiatrist. And I am now the longest standing American member of a group called the International Association of Exorcists.
Right.
Served as their scientific advisor for a while. So between that and the fact that I've been asked by clergy of different faiths to evaluate an enormous number of people who either are or think they are attacked by demonic spirits, I've had a lot of experience in this field.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you teach at a seminary in New York. I did not know that. What's the name of the seminary?
Yeah, I teach at St. Joseph's.
Okay, Catholic.
In New York. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, nice. So on top of that, you psychiatrist and he's teaching in seminary for all my seminarians, in the ivory tower, what we call ivory tower dwellers. You sneak away in your ivory tower. So you just said that you had a lot of experience in this field. How does somebody with a background in psychiatry, psychology, dealing with the brain, how do you get involved in this type of field where it's almost the taboo? It's Like for me, I've only seen one demon cast out a person in my time. I'm 33. That happened when I was 4 years old. So it's like, how does somebody get involved with your credentials? I know the book, how it starts off. Can you tell for the audience how do you get involved in this? Or how did you come involved in diagnosing possessions, oppressions, and vexations, or anything dealing with preternatural experiences?
Well, I always tell people, Trevor, everything I got involved in this field, I've been asked to do. In other words, I didn't really go out of my way to get involved. Maybe I see it, having been asked, as more providential that way. You know,
Hmm.
ultimately, I think I was called by the Lord to help out in this area. So originally, after finishing my residency, I trained at a good program, Yale University,
Hmm.
and I took a job as a what they call an attending psychiatrist at a program in New York. And a priest who happened to know I was a practicing Catholic uh, came into my office one day and asked me if I would be willing to help him evaluate people who whom he thought were probably demonically attacked. And I was a little skeptical, and I told him so. And he said to me, "Well, if you're skeptical, Dr. Gallagher, you're the perfect person for the job." And then, later I was asked to do a few other things. I was asked to join the International Association of Exorcists. Still later, I was asked to do some writing in this area by different magazines and be interviewed on CNN and stuff like that. And then more recently, thank you for mentioning my book. It's called Demonic Foes, very easily available on Amazon or wherever, published by HarperCollins. And what I liked about HarperCollins' involvement in publishing the book was they let me write the book I wanted to write.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think you're familiar with it. You mentioned, and I do tell some harrowing stories, but it's also a very serious book. And as a psychiatrist, you're right in your comments that this is a controversial subject.
Hmm.
I would say that most psychiatrists do not believe in this sort of stuff. But one has to realize too that it's a little understandable because they see a number of people who only think or imagine that they're attacked by demons, so they just assume everybody is in that category. Uh, Possessions themselves, which is kind of the most severe form of a demonic attack, I'm sure I've evaluated over 100 of those and heard about many more as a
Wow.
member of the organization, the International Association of Exorcists.
Hmm.
Even though I say that, Mr. Delaney, these are rare conditions.
Yeah.
I've only seen so many because I've gotten calls from all over the country and sometimes all over the world to evaluate these patients. Now, other types of demonic attacks like infestations or what we usually call oppressions, which are more minor demonic attacks than possessions. I've seen more of those.
Hmm. Hmm.
Still, it's not like this is so common that you know most people are going to see this sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's like when I'm talking to some people, it's like I have to, reiterate to them, like, the biblical audience did not see a demon behind every rock. Like, the civilizations around them seem to be more spooked than what they were. Like, they took human accountability to, just as much as extent than what they would the supernatural. So if their crops didn't turn out right, you know, oh man, I'm cursed. Somebody cursed me. No, you didn't tend to your field like you were supposed to. So uh that's the, with kind of some folks, may, because the door slammed shut in my house, something's in my house. Well, it might be a draft, like kind of, crossing your T's and dotting your I's before you rule out. Is that's what I'm hearing, what it sounds like that goes into diagnosing somebody with possession, right? You want to make sure it's nothing else in place, correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's a good example about how people can get carried away in this field too. I always like C.S. Lewis's general statement, which
Hmm.
he wrote in the book. He said there are two extremes, and one extremes is people throughout um, is when people deny the demonic altogether,
Right.
and and increasingly in modern society that is a not uncommon position.
Hmm.
Well, I also emphasize that throughout history, the vast majority of people, and even in the United States, most people, and around the world today, do believe in evil spirits.
Right.
So I in no way think I'm sort of out of the mainstream.
Hmm.
I may be out of the mainstream in my profession, but I'm not out of the mainstream in terms of, most people around the world. But C.S. Lewis said the other extreme is to see the devil everywhere and get preoccupied with it.
Right.
And as you say, start to attribute any odd things in life or things that go wrong in life is automatically caused by demons, like saying every illness comes from
Hmm.
demons. We don't believe that, and that's one of the reasons, though, that um, a lot of clergy will bring a psychiatrist like myself into this to help sort out sometimes when it's hard for them to do that themselves.
Right. So let me, before we go a little bit deeper, I want to start. What was it like when those was it two priests or one priest that came to you, as you mentioned in your book? I think it was one priest with the case of oppression with the Hispanic young lady. What was that like? Did, as a Catholic then, did you believe in exorcisms? I mean, I know with your background academically, did you kind of push that off as like, almost how uh enlightenment period did with a lot of miracles? Well, what we have, it's more updated modern medicine, blase blase. Was it like, I'm very skeptical about this, or maybe let me help them out and say, well, this person might be a schizophrenic?
Well, I was certainly skeptical that I would see many cases during the
Hmm.
course of my career. Uh, I was a believer,
Hmm.
so I did believe the stories in the Gospels, although I also understood that, you know, there were some experts or so-called experts who were explaining away some of those phenomena. So I would say that I certainly was open to the idea that people could be demonically attacked,
Hmm.
and certainly that occasionally God would work miracles. But I thought they were rare enough that I wasn't likely to see them, and that the vast majority of people who thought that they were demonically attacked were going to turn out to have some kind of medical or mental illness. And there is truth to that, because there are a lot of people, and there are more people who think they are attacked by the demons than really are.
Yeah.
But I went into it with some skepticism, and then I certainly, when the priest described this case of this woman who was getting literally beat up by spirits, she wasn't possessed,
Hmm.
but she was a very holy, charitable woman,
Hmm.
married woman who was very involved in the pro-life movement. And when he told me that uh, she would have bruises all over her body caused by evil spirits,
Hmm.
I definitely went into that kind of skeptical. But after I met her and heard the whole story and ruled out, including in combination with some other doctors, that she could have any kind of bruising disorder. Sometimes people have problem with clotting in their blood by platelets, but all her tests were um, negative. All her medical tests were negative. Her story was very credible. She and her husband would witness bruises just appear spontaneously, as if she was being pummeled by evil spirits. They them believed that these were evil spirits. And it turned out, I said to the priest, this one exorcist, who was a prominent guy in the field, and I said, well, Father, I think indeed you're right, that this is an oppression. And after that, of course, he began to show me a lot more cases, and eventually I came to see possessions as well.
Right. Um, it says on page 30 of your book, talking about this particular case. Her name is Maria, and obviously, Dr. Gallagher does change the names. Obviously, you got to deal with HIPAA laws and such, and so any exorcist will tell you, because of certain regulations. As you guys listened to the last episode with Father Younger, uh, he did not go into detail of protection for these folks, but he says the lady's name that he's talking about now, Maria, and her husband Alejandro believed the devil was targeting her. And it goes on to page 31, was targeting her possibly for religious zeal and good works, or perhaps Maria added a brujo, a nasty man, or a sorcerer had put a curse on her, although neither she nor Alejandro could explain why the devil or demons would single her out. What was the conclusion? Like, why was she being attacked? Is it because of the bruja put a hex on her, a curse, or was it just because that she was actually spreading the gospel, doing the good works, and bam?
Well, I think it does underscore, her case underscores a very important point,
Hmm.
because you will see some good Christians who say, well, a good Christian is never attacked by evil spirits.
Right, right,
That is not true.
right.
That in fact, evil spirits can go after holy people in different ways.
Hmm.
And evil spirits will go after people for different reasons. Some people have and genuinely opened themselves up to the devil in some ways, but they also sort of particularly hate people who are spreading the gospel, people who are holy. And it is unfortunate that some churches in America will say, well, you must have done something very sinful for this to happen. That's not always the case. So in her case, I think that she was targeted a little bit precisely because she was such a good, holy person. Now, it may be complicated because in her case, she did have contact apparently,
Hmm.
not of her own free will, but there was someone in her town. She was Mexican American, and there was someone in her town who was described as a brujo or a sorcerer, and we were never quite sure. And one has to be a little skeptical of curses and stuff.
Hmm.
But most people throughout history, Trevor, and in most countries in the world today, are a little more believing that curses and hexes occasionally do happen.
Hmm.
And so I do think that was a possibility, although I think that stuff is very rare. Um, I I think that most people who are subject to hexes and curses, paradoxically, may have allowed themselves to be a little vulnerable.
Hmm.
In other words, if a person is spiritually strong, and if a person is really protecting themselves in a good Christian way with their prayers and everything, it is unlikely that the demon is going to get all that much of a hold on a person.
Right.
Unlikely, for instance, that they would ever get possessed. But I do after many years of talking to a lot of people who credibly have felt that they may have been cursed, I do believe that's sometimes a factor. And there is always one factor or another. I tell another story in the book where a guy came to me from the Pacific Northwest, and he was being demonically oppressed.
Hmm.
And it took me many sessions with him. You know, these people are not patients of mine, by the way. They're just people I consult for. And it took many sessions for him to admit to me that when he was young, he had unfortunately made a kind of very loose pact with Satanism. He promised himself to Satan, and I think that's much more of a common way that someone gets demonically attacked than a curse. People will turn to Satan directly, and I've seen those kind of cases,
Hmm.
including even people who are Satan worshipers. More commonly, people will just turn to evil or occult practices in some serious way. And all those people are much more commonly attacked by either an oppression or a possession than a holy person like Maria. But it shows that even with a good Christian woman like Maria, that 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 sort of thing can happen.
Right. Um, let me ask you this. I want to while you're working with these folks, have you ever seen, as far as the, and this will be considered external oppression or vexation? I know that's kind of a toss up which terminology to use with certain folks involved in the field. Have you ever seen it manifest in front of you, like, maybe somebody that is oppressed coming to you seeking help, like abrasions on the skin, claw marks, or anything? Have you ever seen that in front of you in your office?
I have actually, I've never seen a spirit manifest itself visibly,
Hmm.
and I've also never seen an immediate physical attack, what you're referring to as external elements of oppression. I've had many, many people who have described those attacks. I've seen the results of the attacks, the bruises,
Hmm.
scratches, and stuff like that. And I've certainly seen many people who have brought me pictures, credible pictures of such evidence. What I have heard, especially during exorcisms, now I'm not an exorcist, I'm not a clergy person, but I've been to, probably over 100 exorcisms just as an observer.
Hmm.
Sometimes our church likes to have a doctor or a nurse there or something.
Right.
And I certainly have seen demons talk
Hmm.
through the person. I've also certainly heard them speak in foreign languages, languages that the person never could have known. And even outside of the exorcisms, sometimes during my exams of these people, the demons will sometimes break through and talk and curse and things like that. So I could say that I've heard demons. Uh, thank the Lord, I've never seen one.
Right. Right. Yeah. Praise God for that. Um. So I mean, it's like it. Is this intense for you? I mean, just anybody that I mean, like the book is phenomenal. I mean, my book is that I have Dr. Gallagher's. I mean, it's chock filled with notes. I mean, it's phenomenal. It seemed intense because I'm like, well, if I am Dr. Gallagher, if I put myself in the shoes in that position, it's like, whoa. I mean, you hear about it, you read about it in the gospels, but because how advanced we are in society, it's like if something like that were to happen, like how your reaction to that, hearing them speak and going to, exorcisms, or, being the medical doctor. Is it intense?
Yeah, it can be quite intense. And
Hmm.
I suppose at this point in my life, I've seen enough cases, and I do try to protect myself spiritually.
Right. That's important.
I own spiritual practices, and I ask for the prayers of people all the time. So I'll ask your audience to pray for me, please.
Please, we are praying. We're praying.
Uh, Certainly in the beginning, when I first saw cases, it was pretty intense. I was taken aback.
Hmm.
I think with a lot of experience, I'm a doctor. I have to keep my head and keep my cool and sort of just concentrate on helping these individuals. So I'd say more recently, it never becomes entirely routine, but I tend to evaluate these people in a pretty calm way at the moment.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about the occult, and a lot of things that I've read, I've been listening to. It's always, and I think what both Catholics and Anglicans follow, the checklist. Father Vincent Lambert has it in his book, the checklist that they go by. What seems to be so common when doing a history on the person is the occult. Anything? Have you played with any Ouija boards, tarot cards, been to psychics, mediums, clairvoyants? You involved in any type of Satan group? Is this the most common history element in your cases? Is something dealing with the occult, satanic group, playing with something that they should not be? How dangerous is that? How common, and then how dangerous? Hopefully it helps.
I'm not saying that everybody who plays with the Ouija board, they don't take it very seriously, or they read a Harry Potter book or something. I'm not saying
Right.
all those people automatically are going to be attacked. But if one has a serious involvement or a serious interest in occultism of different,
Hmm.
including, going to psychics, um, getting interested in witchcraft, um, especially in combination with doing anything about it, you know,
Hmm.
wearing, demonic paraphernalia, or doing evil things in part, in part and parcel as part of some kind of occult practice.
Right.
That's when a person really foolishly is opening themselves up. Um, I like to say to people, I like to phrase it, people who have a serious involvement in occultism or evil or very sinful things. Those are the people who open themselves up. And
Right.
sometimes things are found together, sometimes they're found separately. People can do evil things without necessarily being explicitly occult about it.
Right. Right. All right. So I wanted to speed along a little bit. Some of the more responsive parts of your, when we were advertising for this podcast, have come in from the case about Julia, the satanic queen, high priestess. What When that happened, I mean, I thought when I got to that chapter, it was me and a friend of mine. We were reading through that chapter. I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna make it through this chapter. It was intense. What was going on with that? Was this the most, probably? And I know probably since then, you might have had some more cases since then. Had this been the most uneasy case that you've experienced? Can you tell us a little bit about Julia, all that went on with that?
Yeah, that was the most dramatic case I've ever seen. And very early on, that same priest had brought uh, Julia to my house, which
Hmm.
I thought was a bad idea. But he wanted to keep the case moving, and he had already concluded that she was possessed. And interestingly, I tell several stories about her in the book, including that the night the night before she came to my house, my wife and I noticed that the cats in our house went berserk. We
Hmm.
separate them. And then when I was introduced to the woman I called Julia the next morning by this exorcist, uh, she looks me in the face, and the first words out of her mouth is, "Hi, Dr. Gallagher. How did you like the cats last night?" So, well, she knew about it or had contributed to that.
Hmm.
I was pretty taken aback as well as annoyed. Later, I was involved in a car ride with her, where the priest and I were in the back of the were driving in the front seat of the car, and she was sitting in the back. And she did go into a possessed trance for about um, 5 minutes. Uh, a very evil sounding voice came out of her using her vocal cords, but because a possession is the control of the body, it's not the control of the soul.
Hmm.
So the demon was using her vocal cords, but in a much more guttural way, and was basically for 5 minutes cursing the priest. I remember she called him at some point, "You effing monkey priest, leave us alone. You'll be sorry." And the priest gave me a look like, "Do you see, Dr. Gallagher, what we're involved with here?"
Hmm.
Later during the exorcism, she had some of the most dramatic exorcisms that has ever been reported to me. I've been a pretty busy guy with a family and my career, so I didn't go to any of her exorcisms. But about eight people who witnessed, all salt of the earth people told me that she levitated for about a half an hour.
Hmm.
That she spoke foreign languages, which I have seen in many other exorcisms, and exhibited what they call the criteria of superhuman strength, trying to escape from the people holding her down.
Hmm.
So the priests, the two priests involved, including the chief exorcist, who was another guy who later verified this on a radio program, um, they knew she was possessed from the beginning. What they were concerned about and why they wanted Julia to speak to me, which I did on a number of occasions, was why she was so ambivalent.
Hmm.
She did want to be relieved of her possession, but unfortunately, she didn't really seem to want to leave this occult, in
Hmm.
part because she had some, you could call it psychic abilities, which again were not of her own, but were granted to her by Satan.
Right.
She explicitly worshiped Satan, who she called her master. So exactly what her motivation was, other than wanting to be rid of the possession, was a little unclear to the priest. So
Hmm.
they wanted me to help her sort it out. Uh, and the fact of the matter is that she was a very conflicted woman. For instance, uh, in many ways, the cult had become her home,
Yeah.
and she probably was in love with the leader of the cult. But in addition, she was also afraid of leaving the cult, and she was also afraid of losing these psychic powers that she felt Satan granted her. Now, I don't want to indicate, I don't want to suggest that these cults are common.
Hmm.
They A few of them do exist.
Yeah.
Especially early on in my psychiatric career, there was a certain hysteria. They call it the satanic panic, where
Right.
people were seeing Satan everywhere and blaming Satan for all these, kidnaps, sometimes even imagining, if you can believe this is true,
Hmm.
imagining they were, ritually abused as a kid and had forgot it and then only remembered it later. So there were these exaggerations. But this woman, and it was remarkable, number one, that she told me these stories, and that she actually, even though I don't use her name, she actually gave me permission to write about her, which I
Hmm.
did at length in the book. Now, because she never really gave up her involvement with the cult and even Satanism, naturally she was not delivered.
Right.
She wanted it both ways. She wanted to be um, freed from the possession without turning to Christ. And you have to make your choice. In
Yeah.
fact, a big part of working with possessed individuals is not just to say the prayers of exorcisms, which help keep the demons under control, but you have to work at it yourself. You have
Yeah.
to you have to become more spiritual and more attuned to the Lord, or else you're not going to be delivered.
Right. Right. So it's, what they say, the most important part in these ministries, the exorcism or deliverance, obviously Jesus Christ, with a person that is under attack, possessed, they have to want to be freed. You have to use your free will as people, just as your free will. If you went down that path of the occult, you chose that. You have to want to be freed first, but you also need to develop that relationship with Christ Jesus. If it's tending mass or if it's tending Bible study, Sunday morning worship services, getting involved in church, it's going to take an effort on your end, and so it's not like I want to be freed. And it's like, what sound like with Julia, I wanted my cake and eat it too, but it's like, no, it's not going to happen. So I would say too, like when I was reading that chapter, Dr. Gallagher, my heart, as you started to speak with her, my heart started to break for her, because it seemed like the cycle, it started with the abuse, obviously what happened, sexual molestation. I'll get it right one day. um Started there, and then she winds up finding this satanic group, and I don't know if you call him a high priest or whatever in the satanic cult that she was a part in, was using her. And
Herself, the queen of the group in a hot,
right.
which is precisely why she had such a dramatic case.
Yeah. And it just started to, it's just like a cycle of nonstop abuse with her, desiring to be loved, to find that love of a man. And it just started, like, where it started off intense, my heart started to break for her. And it was just kind of like a felt a heaviness, just like a burden that you would, like Christ would feel the indignation when he'll come across some type of injustice in the gospels. So, and that's what I felt with Julia, um with that. But could you talk a little bit about what goes on when you are talking with people? Like, obviously you're brought in for the medical examination, the psychiatry, psychology aspect of it. What is that like, if you're able to talk about, what goes into play, conversation, how do you start going down your checklist of ruling out, mental illness or possession, or ruling out possession, it may be some type of mental illness.
Well, what I mostly do is a kind of standard medical workup.
Hmm.
And since a lot of the cases that are tricky or hard to discern turn out to have psychiatric problems.
Hmm.
Not always, they might have something that seems like a medical problem, like a seizure disorder or something. So I do a pretty standard medical workup, and if we need to, I'll even do laboratory tests or X-rays or something if it's needed. It's not always needed,
Hmm.
but I will do a very standard history. I'll do a standard what we call a mental status exam, and I'll really be able to discern, and I can do this with a great deal of confidence usually. I'll be able to discern whether this is demonic or medical, or psychiatric. And then I give my opinion to the clergy person, who in fact makes the official diagnosis, which is a spiritual diagnosis.
Right.
Um, but I look for a number of things. I always tell people you have to look at the totality of the case.
Hmm.
So you're going to see something in their history that suggests why this may have happened to them, including the fact that they may be a holy person and attacked for that reason. But
Yeah.
more commonly, especially in the more severe cases, the person has done something in their history to, so to speak, open the door, as we say. So you look at the history, you look at the context, and then you look at the particular, presentation.
Hmm.
And at least with a possession, these rare possessions, you're always going to get some indication of something attempting and succeeding in controlling the individual. Often that person will occasionally go into a trance, which generally happens during the exorcism as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you'll have the clear evidence for the emergence of a separate personality. And we always emphasize, certainly in the Catholic Church, that there has to be moral certitude, that
Right.
not just going to willy-nilly say, well, we spiritually intuit that this person is, oppressed or possessed. They have to meet certain definite criteria. Now, the criteria are varied.
Hmm.
I like to talk about they have hidden knowledge of things. They may exhibit extremely abnormal movements or exhibit strength to
Right.
a superhuman degree. They may speak in foreign languages that they have never known. And there are other things too that can uh, exhibit that might seem to be in the realm of either the so bizarre and extraordinary that they don't seem normally uh, humanly possible or easy or explainable by medical reasons, or outright what the modern term is, demonstrating something that's truly paranormal, like the things.
Hmm.
And once you have that, once you have evidence that this is a person who might have been possessed, given their history, this is a person who seems to be controlled at times by a spirit, and that spirit is clearly manifesting itself by these extraordinary signs, sometimes paranormal features, then you can be pretty clear that what's going on is not psychiatric or medical; it's demonic. But you have to fulfill those rigorous criteria. Sometimes it takes a while.
Hmm.
Like any medical diagnosis, sometimes you don't get the whole story right away. But I know the exorcists that I work with, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, say they tend to be, fairly educated, um, cautious, sober people who do look for these strict criteria.
Hmm. Hmm. Let me so as far as I know, there's only two books by medical doctors, psychiatrists that are out on the subject. One is by the late Dr. Scott M. Peck, or M. Scott, I think it's M. Scott Peck. By the way, he has a book called Glimpses of the Devil. He's since deceased. I read his after I did your book. What are your thoughts on hypnosis? Because he seems to take a different approach and try to counsel the demon or talk to the demon directly. What are your thoughts on hypnosis as far as dealing with this?
Well, I actually was trained in hypnosis,
Okay.
and it can be a helpful procedure, especially to get someone to learn how to relax and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But I never use it in my practice. Sigmund Freud, who had some interesting things to say, although
Right.
a lot of his methods were marred by his atheism and anti-Christian attitudes, anti-religious attitudes. Um, but he gave up hypnosis because he felt that it was too easily subject to uh, being misused by patients who were too easily suggestible.
Hmm.
I find the same thing. I don't think it's very useful in normal psychotherapy. And sometimes when people are hypnotized, they can come up with memories that, you know, they think are true, but are not even true.
Right.
So I kind of disagreed with the way Dr. Peck did some of that stuff, and also the fact that he actually, as a doctor, not only engaged with the demons, which I discourage anybody except somebody who's really authorized to do that sort of thing. Um, and he even did an exorcism himself.
Hmm.
I think he was very unwise. No, I think he's trying to do the best he could. I don't think he was aware of the century old wisdom
Right.
classification of these things. So he was going in a little bit on his own, which may not have been super wise. Now, I want to say that there are, I'm not the only psychiatrist in the world who believes in this stuff. I may, my academic chairman who actually encouraged me to investigate this stuff
Wow.
said that I may, and he was a Catholic, and
Hmm.
he had seen an exorcism when he was younger. He's retired now, um, but he said that the book I wrote may be unique in history because it is unusual for certainly an academic psychiatrist to investigate and write about these things. And in addition, he rightly points out that I may have seen more of these cases than any other doctor in the world. However, I want to emphasize that I'm not the only person who does this evaluation, and there are other doctors who have written about their experiences in different.
Hmm.
As I said, psychiatrists tend to be a little more skeptical even than the average American about this stuff.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I don't think my beliefs, when you look at Christianity, Islam, even in the Eastern religions, tend to believe in which don't understand the fullness of Christ, obviously, but they do attempt to expel evil spirits, and they believe in evil spirits. So throughout history as well, Trevor, most people, as I mentioned, have believed in this stuff and have tried to do what they can given the beliefs of their own religion. So
Hmm.
I don't think in any way out of the mainstream, but even other psychiatrists, let alone a lot of clergy now, have written books about this stuff.
Right. So, would you say the idea in psychiatry of accepting something preternatural is coming around?
Well, psychiatry as a whole has moved a little bit beyond the anti-religious prejudices
Hmm.
of the early psychoanalytical movement. I am a psychoanalyst, but I certainly don't believe that Freud's ideas attacking religion are sensible ones. I actually think he was a brilliant but prejudiced man who was basically a materialist.
Hmm.
Uh, and that spirit had certainly influenced not so much psychiatry as the subfield of psychoanalysis, but it became very influential, including in American psychiatry for a while. As American psychiatry has become, I would say a little more sophisticated about some of that stuff, it is more open to different ideas of spirituality
Hmm.
as 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 a science, not as a science of theology, but as a science of human behavior. It really, understandably, is not going to take a great position on spiritual phenomena or
Right.
preternatural phenomena. So I'm not so sure it should get over involved in that.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, even the official societies of psychiatry, like the American Psychiatric Association, are much more open to the value of a healthy, and I stress a healthy spirituality in a person's life.
So it's like the once great divide of science and theology, where they were, theology was once viewed as the queen of science, is starting to, what it seems like, come back around to each other.
Well, at least I think people, intelligent people and people who, have some appreciation for the realm of the spirit and the
Hmm.
importance of healthy religion in a person's life. I do think people in our field as well are more open to that. That's not to say that all that many of them are going to be, open to the idea of diagnosing demonic attacks,
Right.
because that stuff is rare enough, and because they see so many people who just imagine, they're hearing voices of the demons and stuff like that. When
Hmm.
well, it's schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or something, it's perhaps understandable that they have lingering skepticism in that area.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I know we gotta wrap up time here. We got about 10. Let me give about 10 minutes. If you don't mind, Tim, if you got 10 more minutes. Do you only see Roman Catholics and Protestant clergymen who are involved in this come to you, or do you have other religious faiths that do seek your help?
No, I have people of all religious faiths come to me. Uh,
Okay.
I usually like them to be referred by a clergy person because I know that, I'm a psychiatrist, I can help people. Uh,
Right. So you would have like a Islamic imam that would call you and say, "Hey, Dr. Gallagher, I have, such and such."
that has happened. That has happened.
Okay. Because we received that question, how could they cast out a demon? Several people, how can they cast out spirits if they're not Christian? But, you know, there's sources. I mean, we even find, exorcism was already on the scene when Jesus showed up. So
Right.
they had some methods. So in your experience, are there clergy of different faiths? Maybe I didn't clear that question up enough.
I think there are good men of different faiths who have
Okay.
some success. I definitely think that, as a Christian, that even they, like the concept of grace in general, are, you might say, unconsciously uh, drawing on God's power, drawing on the power of Christ without really knowing it.
Right.
I think some good people of other faiths, there are good people of other faiths by the grace of God, without knowing the fullness of, Christian belief. So I think there are some successes in other religions, although much more so in the Christian orbit. I think Christian exorcists, this is just my experience, are much more successful because they explicitly draw on our Lord.
Okay. All right. Real quickly, can you mentioned one towards the beginning while we were talking about, there is an unhealthy obsession with this field. You wrote about a girl in your book who was attached to a sort of a charismatic group. And she was longing for that fatherly love, but she was kind of, you used the word histrionics. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. What is the danger, of someone obsessing because you were able to, as soon as you all took her aside into, the chapel room, you and the priest started praying, she hit the floor, started to slither like a snake, do things, you were able to say, no, she's faking. you know what is the danger of somebody, you may have somebody look at it from an academic standpoint, such as yourself, or, if you're in seminary, you might be working on demonology, Satanology, angelology. So obviously this is a part, right? Um, but somebody that's watching horror films, I mean, you're watching The Exorcist, what are the dangers of really, becoming too obsessed with this?
Well, I think in general, as Christians, we should concentrate on the fact, the positive elements of religion. In other words, we understand God loves us,
Hmm.
understand that He wants to save all people, um, and that He gives us, the means of salvation and sanctification during our life.
Hmm.
Um, People who get too preoccupied or fascinated by the darker side, which exists and which people need to take into account, can sometimes get carried away, either with a kind of unhealthy obsession with the topic or anxiety about the topic,
Right.
or in rare cases like the case of the young lady I wrote about in the book, their imagination goes a little bit wild and they, because of psychological reasons, need for attention, that sort of thing,
Hmm.
they actually imagine that they're attacked when in fact, to a sensible doctor, let alone most clergy, can spot, the fact that there are fakes. Uh, I write about in the book chapter where I talk about the kind of false or counterfeit cases, and the ones I see over and over are either people who are psychotic. People can be psychotic and think they're attacked by evil spirits or hearing evil spirits when their primary problem is mental illness. Other people can have what we call Trevor personality disorders, where they're very drawn to the dark side and even evil, uh, but they're not truly experiencing what we call an overt or extraordinary attack of demons. And then there's this final group that I think is sometimes commonly mistaken themselves or by people around them as demonically attacked. Those are the kind of people who are very suggestible, histrionic, who dissociate.
Hmm.
For instance, I've also seen scores of cases of multiple personality in my life, which is now called dissociative identity disorder. And some people will say, well, that's what all these people are. When a demon voice comes out of them, they must be just an example of multiple personality or dissociation. And again, that's not true at all. You can make the distinction, but it is true that some people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder will have different sides of themselves that come out in so-called alters, including maybe more of an evil side of them that comes out. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're attacked. So those are the kind of we talked about some of the medical conditions, but those are some of the psychiatric conditions that people can confuse. And again, why sometimes um, a certain amount of expertise, which I tried to put into the book, is necessary to help sort
Hmm.
things out.
Good, good. All right. So if we can do this in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, is there anything else that you would like to add that we did not cover? I know we kind of did a nutshell of your book, but is there anything that you find importance that you would like to share with the audience at this time?
Well, I'd just like to reinforce the point that you articulated very well earlier. I've known most of or put it this way, a lot of the most prominent exorcists in the world over the last 25 years. And they all agree that exorcism is not for everybody.
Hmm.
People who are possessed don't need formal, oppressed don't need formal exorcisms usually. Uh, but in addition, the main thing is the person's spiritual journey and the need to turn to Christ. And many of the exorcists have said that's even with a severe oppression, it's 10% helped by the exorcism, and it's 90% helped by their turning in prayer and renouncing their past involvement or sins. That's the important, I think, pastoral point that Hollywood often gets wrong, but
Right,
that good Christians should keep in mind.
right. Well, good, good. I tell you what, this has been such a phenomenal podcast. I know I've enjoyed it. I know my audience is going to enjoy it. Hopefully, you all enjoy it. You can pick up Dr. Gallagher's book, Demonic Foes: My 25 Years as a Psychiatrist Investigating Possessions, Diabolic Attacks, and the Paranormal, from Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, any place that sells books. I know I saw his book in Barnes and Nobles physically, saw it on the shelf. I was like, man, this is Dr. Gallagher. I have it at home, but you can get it anywhere that sells books without a doubt. Probably your best bet is go Amazon, or you can go to HarperCollins direct. I'm not certain if HarperCollins does sell books directly to the public or
We
unless you have to. They
go to
do. Okay.
that as well. Yeah.
Okay, so it is published by HarperCollins, which is academic in and of itself, which is I have quite a few. There's Circle, my office here, that's published from HarperCollins, so it is trustworthy. Dr. Gallagher, appreciate you. Thank you so much. Is there any type of other resources? I know your book. Is there any other resources you recommend? Because I know I'm gonna get some inboxes. Hey man, what were the books you talking about?
Well, you mentioned Father Lampert. He has a nice book where he gets, my book gets more into the discernment and some technical aspects of the
Right.
field, although I tell a lot of stories. Whereas Father Lampert concentrates a little more on the pastoral aspect and the theology of it. So that's a good book as sort of complementary to my own.
Okay. Well, hey, listen, thank y'all so much. Stay tuned to our Instagram page, and I will post, if you're interested in more, post some pictures of Dr. Gallagher's book and others as well. Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all. God bless you. Peace.